Bem-vindos ao RegulaCast, que hoje recebe o professor Ted Kury, que é diretor de estudos em energia do Centro de Pesquisas de Serviços Públicos da Universidade da Flórida, além de uma referência mundial na área de regulação. Ao longo dos anos, o professor Kury construiu uma carreira acadêmica, mas também acumula experiência no setor privado, em órgãos reguladores do estado da Flórida, que tem uma infraestrutura de energia que é atingida com frequência por furacões e tornados. O professor Kury participa do programa de treinamento PURC Banco Mundial em Regulação de Serviços Públicos e Estratégia, e este ano, por encomenda da ABAR, ele ministrou um curso intensivo voltado à regulação de contratos de saneamento em Belo Horizonte. Em 2025, a ABAR o trará novamente ao Brasil para oferecer desta vez uma nova versão do curso, ampliada para mais serviços públicos e outras áreas da infraestrutura. Seja bem-vindo ao RegulaCast, professor Ted Kury.
Obrigado. Thank you.
PURC and ABAR teamed up for a very successful course in Belo Horizonte earlier this year, and people interested in the 2025 PURC course in São Paulo often ask us, will it be the same course that took place in Belo Horizonte? What can the 2025 class look forward to? Can you tell us how different you plan it to be?
And I would say, in a broad sense, what we're looking to do is repeat the things that worked, the things that resonated with folks that they found useful in the course. But we've made a number of important changes. I think the biggest change is that the 2024 course was a 5-day course, where the 2025 course is going to be a 6-day course. So we have one entire day of new material. One of the things we noticed in the course was that pricing was a very important consideration for folks. You know, what does it cost to access or consume municipal services like electricity and gas and water and sanitation and transportation services? But we really didn't address the mechanics of pricing. That is, what are you specifically looking for when you set rates for electricity or rates for cubic meters of water or wastewater, or tolls on roads, or access to service, like for airports or for ports or for municipal services. So we're going to fix that this year. And we're going to be devoting an entire day to the pricing process. What goes into the prices? How do we, from a technical or mechanical point of view, what are the different trade-offs that we make when we set specific prices for services? We recognize that some of the Brazilian regulators, they don't necessarily set the prices for individual services, but even in cases where they don't, they establish the guidelines for the pricing process. So we want everyone to be familiar with the mechanics of setting prices, what's involved in this process, and what are the different trade-offs. That, I think, is going to be the biggest difference for the course this year. The second is we have a greater emphasis on transportation. So the 2024 course, most of our examples, most of our work concerned the energy sectors and the water, wastewater sectors. We understand that transportation folks face some of their own challenges. So we'll be integrating more examples from toll roads for public-private partnerships related to various road projects and airports and ports. So, like I said, we're sticking with the things that worked from the last course, that resonated with folks, that helped folks to do their jobs. But we've made a couple of critical additions, again, based on the wonderful feedback we got from all of our participants.
O PURC oferece cursos semelhantes ao customizado para a ABAR e para as agências brasileiras em outros países em desenvolvimento. Algo em comum que você encontra nos reguladores para quem o senhor dá aulas nos países em desenvolvimento?
I think the biggest thing we find in common with all of these folks is that they are bright, educated, hardworking folks that have a very difficult job. And we always stress here at PURC that, we don't do the job of the regulators, the hard work that makes sure that people have electricity service and clean water and access to natural gas, access to transportation assets. That's the work that the regulators do. That's the biggest thing that folks have in common. And it's, certainly it's our privilege to get a chance to work with these people and do anything we can to help make their jobs a little bit easier. The one thing we hear from a lot of folks is the difficulties in dealing with stakeholders that are outside of the regulatory process. So there are a lot of people involved in regulation on the periphery. You've got consumer groups, you've got utilities, you've got government ministries, you've got other regulators in some cases, and these outside parties impose constraints on the regulator and the way they approach their job. So managing a lot of these outside interests, I think, is a common theme that runs through all of the folks that we work with. How do you go about managing these external constraints? And so a big part of the course is looking at strategies for addressing some of those constraints. I think the other thing that I hear most often from folks is looking for one blanket solution for a particular question. How do we organize the electricity sector? What's the best way of providing water and wastewater services, or organizing our transportation network? And what we've seen working with folks all around the country, all around the globe, is that there isn't necessarily one best solution that works for every country. So one of the things we emphasize in all of our courses is not necessarily saying to someone, this is a tool you should use. It's really understanding what are the strengths and weaknesses of these different tools. Because every tool that we talk about in the course, whether it's a pricing method or a method of regulation, there are some drawbacks to that tool. There are other things that tool helps you to accomplish. So really, ultimately finding the best solution for your particular country, your sector, your individual challenge. It's a matter of taking these tools, utilizing the tools that have the strengths that you're looking for and the weaknesses that you either don't worry so much about or that you can mitigate in some other way. So there's no global solution to all these problems. Every country, every sector finds the best solution for them. And that's what we're trying to help them do.
Os reguladores no Brasil, especialmente aqueles que trabalham na ANEEL, Agência Nacional de Energia Elétrica, têm recebido muita pressão recentemente por causa dos apagões que têm atingido a maior cidade do Brasil, São Paulo. Podemos esperar novos cortes de energia à medida que as alterações climáticas, a mudança climática se intensifica. Como podem os reguladores ajudar a prevenir mais danos à população?
Yeah, one of the realities that we deal with in regulating infrastructure is that ultimately all of the costs are borne by the people. Sometimes those costs are borne through the rates that they pay for service, so the rates they pay for electricity, or the rates that they pay for water, or the tolls they pay for the roads. Sometimes these costs are borne through their taxes in cases where the government may subsidize a portion of the infrastructure or the infrastructure service. And finally, if the utility or other service provider is not financially viable and is unable to provide service, then the people end up paying through a reduction in either the quality of service or the access to service. So the people pay for everything. All the decision makers can do is decide how and when. So when we're talking about some of these concerns in the course, when we're talking about access to service, when we're talking about quality of service, and we'll be going through both of them in the course, the regulator needs to be able to weigh the costs and benefits of different decisions. So, you can always make the electricity grid, for example, you can make it more resistant to, let's say, a storm surge or water intrusion from sea level rise. You can make it more resistant to wind events, flying debris, falling trees from storms. But all of that costs. And like I said, the people are going to pay all those costs. So for all these decisions, what's critical for regulators is understanding, how do we quantify the benefits that are associated with any of these changes that we make, and how do we weigh those against the cost? And only by ensuring that the benefits outweigh the costs can regulators assure that people are seeing value for the money they're being asked to pay. So that broad question of, whenever we make changes to the system, what are the costs and what are the benefits, and how do we relate those two, will be a recurring theme throughout the course. I can't pick or point to a particular session. It's a broader concept that we'll be covering pretty much in every aspect. So whenever we're talking about change within the industry, whenever we're talking about different ways of regulating through contracts, different types of contracts, when we're talking about different sectors, when we're talking about different aspects of service, whether, again, it's quantity of service, quality of service, or access to service. All of those considerations will be consistently looking at, what are the costs of doing things this way? What are the benefits of doing things this way? And how do we make sure that the benefits outweigh the costs? That's the only way we see improvement in the sector and improvement in the livelihood of the people.
Na sua opinião, qual a importância de compartilhar as melhores práticas, as boas práticas em diferentes países, entre a comunidade reguladora no mundo todo?
I think it's critical. I don't necessarily like the term best practices. To me, that implies that there is one best way of doing things that works in every country. I think experience shows us that that's not necessarily the case. There may be certain regulatory tools, certain financial tools that may work very well in countries that are similar to yours, but really, this idea of sharing what has worked and why it's worked in one country, and then in other cases, why something hasn't worked very well in another country, is critical when you're coming up with a system that's going to work well for you. So, for example, the United States in the electricity sector, we made a lot of mistakes. We made a mistake in California back in 1999 and 2000 that ended up costing the people of California billions of dollars. They already paid for that mistake. There is no reason for any other country in the world, whether it's Brazil or Nigeria or the Philippines, anybody, there's no reason for the people in those countries to pay for that mistake again. So when we're looking at the ways that we administer the electricity sector, I think we need to look at cases like the California power crisis and say, what happened? How do we avoid these same problems in my country, in my system? Because like I said, the people in California already paid for that mistake. There's no reason for anybody in Brazil to pay for that same mistake. To me, that's the real value of understanding the strengths and weaknesses of these different tools, because you have things that worked in other countries. You have things that didn't work so well in other countries. And that helps us to understand the strengths and weaknesses of different tools. So in that greater understanding of these stories from around the world, I think that helps us for our own country, for our own sector, to choose that mix of tools, which is going to have the strengths that you want to see, and the weaknesses that you either don't worry so much about or that you can mitigate in other ways. But but without collaboration, you don't get that information, without that sharing of knowledge. So to me, it's not necessarily the idea of sharing of best practices, but it's the sharing of strengths and weaknesses of these various tools that helps us to shape the system that is best for our country.
We would like to thank you, Professor Kury, for being here today. And we'd like to end with a message to your future students. What can you tell them?
Well, we're really looking forward to getting the chance to work with you. Like I said, here at PURC, we don't do the hard work that you folks do. All we can try to do is play our part in making it a little bit easier for you to do your job. So I encourage you to take a look at the readings that we're sending out for the course. We're going to be talking quite a bit about some of that material, and mostly we're looking forward to hearing from you. We had a terrific time with the course in 2024. We learned a lot about what helps us to help you. And we're looking forward to growing that as we go forward, hearing your stories, hearing the things that concern you, that are keeping you from doing the best job you possibly can. And like I said, any information we can provide, any guidance we can provide in making your life easier, making your life more productive, well, it's our privilege to have an opportunity to do that. But mostly, we look forward to seeing you all.
E assim terminamos mais um RegulaCast, mais um episódio do RegulaCast, podcast da ABAR, e esperamos reencontrá-los no próximo. Antes disso, você pode procurar a ABAR para se matricular nesse curso que a ABAR e o PURC vão oferecer em São Paulo em maio de 2025, no site abar.org.br. Até o próximo episódio. Até lá.